Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the MetaNerd channel. I am Marcus, bringing you another video for Cardfight Vanguard Willdress. In this video, we will be going through the last of the new Rideline that was introduced alongside DBT09, which is Unica. She's a part human, part unicorn thing. She actually does feature like a never before seen skill. I mean, in order to unlock her full skill, you will need to do an additional requirement. That requirement is the first I see in Vanguard, which is actually refreshing. Although what she basically does is nothing new. She's basically just a very threatening Vanguard attack, which we will get into later. Out of the three new Rideline that was introduced in DP09, this particular Rideline is actually really interesting in terms of, you know, her design as well as her synergy with the existing card that we have in Dark States. She has a very crazy synergy with quite a number of cards, which I will go through later in this video. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at what Unica actually does. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Phoenix Pharos Cards. If you need supplies of singles or splits for Cardfight Vanguard, especially the ones in the video, do check out Phoenix Pharos Cards today, and as a bonus, use the promo code MetaNerd to get an amazing 5% discount. And with that being said, let's get on with the video. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual cards. First off, we have Almajestar Schwart equals Sparda. That's a very weird name, the equals, I don't know. Auto when this unit is rolled upon by Almajestar Turan Dyna, Soul Charge 2. If the critical trigger is Soul Charge, you draw a card. Second skill active, rearguard once per turn. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, cost bind one trigger unit from your soul. This unit gets 10k power until the end of turn. This is like a very interesting grade 1 ride target, but due to the fact that it's actually like a more restrictive version of what Draw Jewel Counterblast 1 Soul Charge 2 if different grade draw 1 skill. This will be a slightly restrictive one because you need to Soul Charge a critical trigger, only then you're able to draw a card, which will tells you that you are most likely going to whiff like maybe 6 out of 10 times of every single game that you activate this card skill. So my word of advice is don't expect this card to go off because it's very inconsistent. Unless of course you are being very lucky in terms of what you soul charge, then sure, good for you. But from the game that I tested with a friend, I think it's not that consistent. For the draw at least, the soul charge 2 is very nice. It's basically the heart and soul of any Dark States deck. So yeah, very nice. The draw is a very nice bonus, but as mentioned before, it is very highly whiffable, and because it's basically soul charge and you need to soul charge a critical trigger, which the whole deck you will only have like maybe 8 to the maximum of critical triggers. But yeah, I mean, don't expect this skill to go off often. It's gonna whiff really hard. The second skill of this card is basically hinting on what the Vanguard is gonna do. It basically binds one trigger unit from your soul to get a 10k power, which will make this either an 18k booster or attacker, which could make one column really huge. After some round of testing, I find this unit to be very annoying due to how much power she's gaining out of like buying one trigger from the soul. It's just insane. And one would argue that this card could be a budget replacement for Brainwash, although Brainwash does gives you 1 soul charge, and this card is basically -1 to the soul. But then again, if you don't have Brainwash, you might as well try to put this in for that power, because Brainwash will need you to constantly soul charge in order to gain more power. But this card, you only need to bind 1 trigger unit from your soul for a 10k power, which in my opinion is quite good, especially for like the decks that don't really care about their soul after they meet their requirement. For example, Fafnir, because you will definitely have like that extra triggers in the soul. You might as well just use it for this card. But as to what to replace with this unit, that's still another story, because this card essentially does nothing until, you know, maybe the late game. But who knows, this card might be a really good card for the other Ridelines, but in this deck it's an absolute stapler in this deck. Moving on to the grade 2, Almajestar Turan Dyna. Auto when this unit is rolled upon by a unit with Astreoa in its card name, choose the Almajestar Schwart Sparda from your soul and call that card and this card to rearguard circle. Second skill active, rearguard once per turn. If you have a Vanguard with Almajestar in its card name, cost Counterblast 1, choose 2 triggers unit from your drop, put them into your soul, and this unit gets 5k power until the end of turn. This unwritten skill is extremely really great in terms of board building. What this means is that when you ride into the grade 3 Unica, you basically superior call this grade 2 as well as the grade 1 that is always going to be in your soul to the rearguard circle. It's a +2 to the board, but it's going to -2 from the soul, however. But then again, with the soul charge 2 from the Great One, I think it's gonna be enough in terms of your soul resources. And this also explains why Turan Dyna, this Grade 2 as well as the Great One, has a rearguard skill, because you are gonna superior call them. And arguably, I think you want to run more than one Turan Dyna as well as Schwart Sparda, because those two cards are really insane. The second skill of this card basically helps you replenish your soul as well as the consistency for Unica's Soul Blast skill. If Turan Dyna managed to survive, by paying 1 counterblast, you basically get to recycle 2 trigger units from your drop and put it into the soul, which will then be able to use for Unica's skill to basically give power, which is really great. And at the same time, moving critical triggers, which is the heart and soul of this deck, into the soul in order for Unica to bind it to activate her skill, which is a very crazy synergy if you think about it. This card being a 15k alongside the Great One being an 18k, this whole column is a 33k column, which to be honest is very disgusting. This is not including personal right. If it does including personal right, of course the whole column is going to be 43, and yeah, it's not including triggers too. This is one scary right line if you ask me. The whole right line is actually very impressive to the point where it might just be the best right line within Dark States, and I would arguably of all time, because it flows so well with what the decks want to do, as well as giving you like that much needed plus, which is super disgusting if you ask me. So overall, the Grade 2 and the Grade 1 by themselves is an excellent for this whole right line and what it wants to do. So yeah, a very scary right line already, and we're just only 2 cards in. Next is the boss unit, Almajestar Astreoa Unica. Auto Vanguard Circle. When a trigger unit is Soul Blast for the cost of this unit's ability, choose one of your units and it gets 5k power until the end of turn. Second skill, Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, cost Soul Blast 3, bind all of the critical triggers Soul Blast for this cost, and perform all of the following according to the number of critical triggers in your bind zone. 1 or more, choose one of your opponent's Vanguard and retire it. 2 or more, this unit gets critical +1 until the end of that battle. 3 or more, this unit gets drive +1 until the end of that battle. The first skill is basically a very nice power boost, and the synergy to the second skill Soul Blast cost is undeniably really good. You're able to choose anything on the board to get that 5k, and you can trigger up to 3 times. If you choose to give each column the 5k, it's basically a mini personal right. And not only that, you don't necessarily have to give different units that 5k. You can actually stack all 3 5ks onto one unit and basically giving that unit a 15k power, which is very nice if you ask me. So as for the second skill, it's basically wanting you to bind your critical triggers as part of the Soul Blast 3 and then, you know, activate most of her skills. Astreoa Unica herself is basically a board sniping, a 2 crit triple drive Vanguard attack. It's basically said that she does not get to restand, but hey, if she gets the restand, it's gonna be really stupid. I know that premium is able to make her work. And keep in mind here is that you will only need 3 critical triggers in the bind zone to get the full effect. It is possible for you to basically get the full skill of Astreoa Unica on the 3rd turn, which is gonna be really stupid if you think about it. However, you need to be very careful on what you Soul Blast afterwards, because if you do Soul Blast a critical trigger, that critical trigger is going to the bind zone, meaning that you may not have enough stuff to basically recycle from the drop zone to the soul, because if you keep Soul Blasting critical triggers constantly, those critical triggers are just gonna go to the bind zone. But then again, you will have maybe draw triggers as well as heal triggers, but you can't really expect them to come out that often. I mean, yes, they do come out, but then again, you just need to be careful on what you Soul Blast in terms of the second skill of Unica. Overall, I would say this unit is kind of like a watered down version of Barrel Magnus, because when you think about it, Barrel Magnus and Unica almost do the same thing. Both of them actually retire something on the board, but then again, Barrel Magnus retire the whole board and Unica just retires 1. Both of them are 2 criticals on attack. Unica is a triple drive, but then again, Barrel Magnus does draw 1 before he attacks. So technically, both of these boss unit actually gets you like the same amount of cards. But of course, Unica does provides you a much more control in terms of what you Soul Charge and Soul Blast, whereas Barrel Magnus just doesn't care. He just wants 15 soul as fast as possible. It's not necessarily a bad thing that Unica is a watered down version of Barrel Magnus. It possibly might be a good thing, but then again, Barrel Magnus and Unica both are basically very different. Although they are doing the same thing, but both of them are very, very different, if you ask me. Overall, a very, very nice boss unit to pick up. If you're interested to pick up a standard deck, I would highly recommend this deck. This deck, it's a very big brain deck, while at the same time, it's a very simple deck. Because this deck I foresaw to have like a lot of skills going on at one time. So it's going to be a little bit intimidating to newer players, but if you took the time to actually master this deck, I'm telling you, you can never go wrong. This deck is potentially going to be a meta-defining deck. Although the support surrounding her is not that great as of yet, but then again, this is only the first wave of Unica support. But with that being said, we actually do have two other support cards that we will go through. The first one is Rollnick Cerberus. Active Rigard once per turn. If you have a Vanguard with Almajestar in its card name, cost Counterblast 1, choose 2 trigger unit from your drop, put them into your soul, and this unit gets 5k until the end of turn. This is basically the same skill as Dyna, the grade 2 in the Rideline. The difference here is that Cerberus here is an 18k attacker while Dyna is a 15k. In sacrificing that magic number, Dyna is able to intercept. So there's really nothing wrong in terms of which card you want to run inside this deck, because you know both of them have their merits. Cerberus here is an 18k. He is able to hit magic number much more better than Dyna, but Dyna is an interceptor, so that's probably going to be the determining factor. He's there to basically help with soul resources as well as consistency, similar to what Dyna is doing. So in my opinion, this card can be run. Just take it as you're running 4 cards of the same unit, that's all. But yeah, a very, very nice consistency unit if you ask me. The next one is Kitz Peak Griffin. Auto Rearguard Circle. When this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Almajestar in its card name, choose 2 trigger units from your drop and put them into your soul. Continuous Rearguard Circle and Guardian Circle. If you have a critical trigger on your bind zone, this unit gets 5k power and 5k shield, active on opponent's turn 2. This card is basically similar to the Cerberus as well as the grade 2 Dyna, although it's on place, so you can't really like recycle your trigger units from the drop to soul. But the main selling point of this card is basically he is essentially free of cost. You don't need to play Counterblast, you don't need to play Soul Blast. He is a 15k attacker as well as a 10k shield interceptor, as long as you have a critical trigger in the bind zone. So a very, very nice defensive unit as well as consistency unit. It's very, very hard to find cards like these nowadays. You can see why this deck is really, really good, because the whole deck is basically supporting what Unica wants to do. The synergy in this deck is insane. Every single card inside this deck has a role to play, to the point where it's actually very scary. And that is all for this video. Do let me know down in the comment section of what do you think of Unica. Unica is by far one of the most efficient as well as well-oiled Ridelines that was ever introduced in the history of Vanguard. I know I'm selling Unica a bit too much here, but I'm impressed in terms of how every single card they release for Unica synergizes so well. I'm real impressed. Do like and subscribe if you like this video, and of course during the bell notification icon so that you don't miss a video out. And of course don't forget to go to Phoenix Farah Cars and pre-order this stuff if you haven't already. With that being said, I'll see you all on the field.